No matter how long you've been riding, there comes a moment when the system matters less than the horse standing in front of you. This was a conversation I loved, and one that made me rethink my own choices with horses. I sat down with Karen Rohlf, an FEI Grand Prix dressage rider, USDF Gold Medalist, and the founder of Dressage Naturally. We covered so much ground that we split this conversation into two parts. In part one, we talk about choice, individuality, and how behaviors we label as tension are often signs we haven't learned to read yet. If you care about doing right by your horse, this episode will give you new ways to think and move forward together.
Dear Horse World, it's Karen Rohlf.
Karen, welcome to the Dear Horse World podcast.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited to have you in the studio because I have had the absolute pleasure of learning from you while I've been here in Florida. And I will say that you live up to your hype.
Oh, that's awesome.
It is.
Good to hear.
I mean, I would say that that's probably I think that's like a real element in the horse world, right? Is there hype around a particular human? And then do they live up to that hype, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very conscious in my marketing. You know, a lot of times I'm told to be like, well, just say you're the best. I'm like, no. Like I try to be very authentic and real and not over the top. I just try to tell it like it is. And that's how I teach. That's how I want to communicate with horses. And so I'm glad it comes through in the marketing because, yeah, I don't want my build-up to be better than the real thing. I don't know what other people are saying about me, but as far as what I say about me, I try to be as realistic as possible.
Well, I'm really excited to even start this episode talking about these two worlds that you married. And I think you were like the first. Are you the OG?
I might be the OG.
I think you were
the first one that I knew of, that's for sure. I'm sure, like the story of monkeys washing the potatoes, like
please tell me the story.
Collective. Well, there's a story about there's island with these monkeys on it, and then someone gave the monkeys these potatoes, and one day one monkey was like, hey, I think if I go wash it in the water, it'll be like a little salty, right, in the ocean. So they started, and then all the monkeys started washing their potatoes in the water, and that made sense. But then on another island that didn't have any contact with that island, those monkeys started washing their potatoes in the water. So it just went out to the collective consciousness. So that's one thing. Somewhere in the world, there was probably someone who was thinking similarly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm the first one that I knew of to put those things together.
Okay, so I want to go back.
Weird story to start with.
I love weird stories, and actually, it's a brilliant story. It's very poignant. I want to go back to the beginning. Because even before we pressed record, I was like, we were talking a little bit about when you moved down to Florida, where you were before. So how did you start? Where did horses hook you?
Like way back?
Yeah. Like the origin of it all.
Yeah. I mean, the joke in our family is my first 3 words were Mommy, Daddy, and I want a horse. So I don't have an event where it started. I can't remember a time when I wasn't horse focused. I drew pictures of horses, dreamed about horses, thought about horses. So it just sort of was who I was for some reason. And luckily enough, my mom had a horse when she was a kid. And then when I was around 7, she got a horse and kept it on a little property at the end of our street. So I got to spend time with horses. I went to horse camp. And my mom, I don't know what she was thinking, but she used to send me down. It was just 4 acres that we rented, and the horse was there, and nobody else. It was in the bushes. And my mom would go get Bart ready, and and so I go down there at 7 years old. It's like a 16 two-hand horse, and I was alone with this horse, and I used to get on him bareback and backwards and just see what would happen and do all this crazy stuff. So luckily I lived, but I got a lot of my beginning with horses was very natural and very wild and just a kid and a horse. So I'm kind of glad it worked out. And neighborhood kids that were older had horses, and they used to play this game where one of them would throw us on the back. They'd be riding bareback, throw us on the back, go run around the trails, throw us in the bushes. And then the other one would try to find us. And then this whole thing. And then if they found us, they would like grab us and throw us on the back. We go.
This is amazing.
So yeah, it was amazing. I'm really glad I lived and it worked out. But again, just that joy of the freedom, and I didn't learn in a riding school where I learned all the rules. I did go to camp and I did take lessons, but I had a lot of freedom just to be with horses. I just wanted to be with them. Like I wasn't a show kid at all.
Do you think that type of experience shapes you not just in your early life, but like in your whole life?
Yeah, I don't know if it shaped me, but it was a result of I got so much from horses. Like I was a really shy kid. I'm probably still a shy adult, believe it or not. But just with the horses, that's where I felt the most comfortable. That's where I felt like I was me and, animals, just the unconditional love. And, that was just a really cool thing. And then I got my own horse when I was in 6th grade. My friend and I finally talked our parents into it, and we did pony club. And again, I was in a situation where I just had my horse out on this property with my other best friend who was 12, 13 years old. And I'm glad we would hack them to the drive-through Jack in the Box. We would take them to the beach. We would use baling twine and make like carts for them. I mean, it was nuts. But, it was wonderful. It was so, joyful and just alone in the bushes with no parents and just a horse. But then doing pony club, which was a very good influence on me. And that first horse made a huge impression on me and really did inform much of what I do now. There was a moment where I kind of outgrew that horse, and I was doing, I wanted to do more, and this was a little, just a funny little horse. He was awesome, but I wanted to do some more showing at that point, and like he just wasn't. I kind of knew it, like it wasn't fair to him. Like it wasn't what he did, and so I made this really hard decision. I was like, I think I need to get a different horse. And the good news was that another neighbor friend who was a little younger than me also was into horses, and it worked out that she could buy him and he could stay there.
Oh, wow.
And, and then I got another horse, and it was like perfect, right? Except it wasn't, because that girl, nothing against the girl, but her trainer had different ideas and they wanted to show it more in like equitation, and it was not equitation horse, and then it needed to be a certain way, and then the stronger bits came out, and then that horse, who was so sweet, ended up like I was scared of it. It got aggressive. I was afraid to go in the stall with it. And so I could witness the same horse in the same environment, and the only thing different was what it was being asked to do. Yeah, and then one summer I came back from our family summer, and he wasn't there, and they sold him somewhere. So it's not a happy story, and it took me a long time to figure out, like, why is why is the relationship so important besides just I'm a nice person? But I keep a picture of him to this day. He's taped to my computer. And one day as I'm finishing my Habits for Excellent Horsemanship course, and I'm like, oh, that's all for him. I mean, I remember making a promise to myself as a little kid, like, I'll never let that happen again. And that's probably why I also don't sell horses anymore. If they're mine, they're mine.
This is the fastest I've ever cried in a podcast.
That's it. And it's strange I'm not. So I'm doing a good job here.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah.
Well, I'm imagining you have made probably a level of peace with that story, right? That's like a story that's an origin story. But I'm sure a lot of people who are listening can just relate to those. I think a lot of us can. A story like that catapults you back to moments that you also have experienced, right? And that's what's so powerful about the horse world, is that there are some universal elements to it that I think are really powerful.
And it's the responsibility, it's the relationship, and it just witness that. And even at the time, like, I couldn't conceptualize it. It took me years to figure out the impact it had on me, but it was like, wow, we are so responsible for the horse's entire experience in life. And when we meet horses that are aggressive or whatever, and you can say that that's the horse, but it's like they're just reacting to their situation, and they're just doing what they think that they need to do. That's, I think, why I love horses more than sport, and I love the horse in front of me more than horses in general. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That makes more sense than most things I've heard in our industry, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about sport a little bit, because I think that your connection to it and your foundation, your background in it is really fascinating to me, especially now that I've gotten to know you a little bit better. It's this incredible marriage between the respect of balance and biomechanics and connection, and then also this reverence for behavior and needs and energy. And I've gotten, for everyone who's listening or watching, I've had the chance to do a few lessons, but I gleaned so much. And it wasn't, you didn't talk a lot. You chose your words really, really carefully, but they're very simple. They're very simple concepts when you think about them, but they're concepts presented in a way that I myself haven't really received them. They're complementary to people that I've worked with, like Mark Rashid, for example. They're really complementary to stuff that I've learned from Tick. But I think you are a really unique person in the horse world, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you that. So I know there wasn't a question in there. I'm like, you're like, well, yes, wow, thank you. She's like, I didn't know I was gonna get.
That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
So let's talk about sport.
Okay.
So for everyone who's listening or watching and are not familiar, maybe you could share a little bit about your career and background in dressage.
Okay. Yeah, funny story. Just because I think it is funny. I started in dressage from that first horse I told you about. His name was Chessie. Where our pony club went to got invited on the local hunt at the local hunt. Mm-hmm. And so we went, and my horse, it was all like a real live hunt, and at the end there was a drag, and he went really fast, and so I couldn't hold him anymore, and he took off, and he passed everybody, like all the red coats, and then he cut through,
which anyone who's listening who does a hunt, that you cannot big no to cross the road.
And then he went through the hounds, like not just like in the middle. There were hounds in the front, and just cut right through.
Oh,
and I'm just ragdolling off him, and then the huntsman on his 4-year-old off the track thoroughbred had to gallop after me and grab my horse, led me up to my mom and said, take this girl for some dressage lessons so she can learn how to control her horse. And so my mom did, and that's how I started taking dressage lessons. And it happened to be at Knoll Farm, which is Ann Gribben's farm on Long Island, because that was the only place, really doing it. And so I didn't take with her right away, but I took with another instructor, and then got a new horse, and then my instructor got pregnant, and Ann was like, I'll take the skinny kid on the thoroughbred. She loved teaching kids. She's always been really supportive of young rider program and stuff like that. So here I was with an off-the-track thoroughbred with the old bowed tendon, and this kid who didn't, who just had a horse who took off with it all the time. He was trained in local hunters, and Ann took us on. And every year she said, all right, we're going to learn the next level. No promises he'll make it, but we'll start learning it. And then he did. And then the next year, well, he's going to have to learn collection now. No guarantees he'll figure this out, but we'll just keep going. And he did. And we went all the way up the levels and did young riders. I represented the young riders team 4 years, once for individual silver. and or individual bronze, sorry, lots of team silvers. And that was it. And then, I was on track to have a different kind of career, but now like people are paying me to ride their horses. And I'm like, let's just keep doing that.
What?
So that's how I got into dressage. I didn't mean to.
It's like you almost, not like you fell into it, but like.
I just kept going with what I love. So I was in university. I got a bachelor's degree in biology. I was going to be a medical illustrator or scientific illustrator.
What?
Yeah. I just love to hang around and draw nature. So, and I I have a science background, so and I love art, so it kind of combined. But then, like I said, I was showing and people were paying me to train their horses, and I thought, why don't I just keep doing that until people stop doing that? And nobody stopped paying me to do that, so I just kept going.
Okay. That just like. But now I don't know you very, very well, but like I actually can totally see you being like a nature illustrator. I've not seen any of your work, but actually because there seems to be like this creative, highly observant side of you.
Yeah. I illustrated my book. So in my book, all the illustrations are mine. And it's observation. It's just drawing to me is observing. Mm-hmm. So, you observe what you're seeing, you observe what you put on the paper and adjust. So
again, now everyone gets to witness the very elegant but very simple way that you put things, right? Because that's a very simple but very elegant way of describing what illustration is. Okay, I want to ask you a question because when you talk about your experience learning from Anne, something really dawned on me as you were talking, and I was thinking, okay, is there a richer experience available to you when your horse is not phenomenal? Whether we're deep in the Rocky Mountains or down in the heat of Florida, we trust YETI products on this journey of a lifetime. From the Roadie 48 cooler to the YETI mugs you see right here in the studio, YETI coolers and drinkware are built tough, smooth, and ready for anything the horse world has in store for us. Before we get back to this episode, a quick note. Later this year, NF Plus will release a new masterclass with Stefan Peters, one of the most respected figures in dressage. A 6-time Olympian and Olympic team silver medalist, Stefan is known for his clarity, feel, and commitment to correct horse-first training. The upcoming course will focus on flying lead changes, which has been highly requested by members. More details to come, but NF Plus members will be the first to hear when it's released. If you want early access, an annual NF Plus membership is the best way to stay in the loop. Sign up today at noelfloydplus.com and use the code DHW for 15% off an annual membership. Now, let's get back to the episode. Something really dawned on me as you were talking, and I was thinking, okay, is there a richer experience available to you when your horse is not phenomenal? Like, so Anne said to you every time, well, we'll see if he can learn this, and then we'll kind of take it from there. Is there something different? If there's something special, there's something richer in that learning experience because the horse, it's not necessarily obvious that that horse is going to meet you at that place.
Absolutely. And I think most things in life, it's about expectations. Mm-hmm. So I was a kid I was eventing at the time too, and I didn't really care about dressage.
Oh.
I really didn't. So when my horse was pre-St. George and starting preliminary, Anne said, you have to decide because you're not going to jump a pre-St. George horse over any more ditches. So I'm like, and I was kind of a chicken. So I'm like, okay, I'll do dressage. So I had my horse at home still on these 4 acres all by myself. And I'd be taken for a lesson once a week to Anne's place in the afternoon. All the fancy horses were put away by then. And then I'd go home. So I think it worked because I didn't know it shouldn't work.
Why?
A kid who doesn't know anything about dressage, on a horse who doesn't know anything about dressage, taking a lesson once a week with no visual example and going home to practice all by herself that shouldn't work. That's not a good plan. If I said I want to try to make the young riders team and become a professional, that would be terrible advice, a terrible plan. But I didn't know it shouldn't work, so I just kept going. And I genuinely loved the process, and I loved my horse. And he he refused to do dressage too many days in a row. He'd literally just like flip out, and I'd be like, okay, so we'll go on a trail ride. Or we didn't really, I didn't, the property I was on was just like trails cut through the woods and a tiny little, like literally ring with a rut in the dirt. So I'd have to go to the school fields to practice in between the soccer fields on flat ground.
Oh my God, stop.
Sometimes it's not even, there was like a slope between. So there was one whole season I did all my dressage on a slope. He was very fit that year.
I bet.
But
great purpose.
Yeah, I've looked back on that because and this actually became integral to my program too. So I have that journey with, his name was Brave Tom. That journey with Brave Tom where he went all the way. He did so much. He was so generous. And later when I was a trainer with Anne, we'd ride around on these fancy imported horses. And we would actually joke that, it's always the nothing, that's in air quotes, everybody, the nothing horses who try so hard. And it's the big fancy horses who have all the ability, but they're the difficult ones. And it was like, ha, ha, ha. So this went on for a while, and Tom retired, and I didn't have a horse for a while. And I kept thinking, gosh, Tom was so special. Tom was so special. Here's these really fancy horses. And sometimes it's more challenging, or they're not as generous. And then a student, or it wasn't my student, but someone at the farm died, and they willed me their horse. And he was kind of a used up, desensitized Pre St. George horse. She was little, she was scared, so he was very safe. And nobody else kind of wanted him. And so I got him. And he was the type of horse who, like, you'd go like up to the stall with a bag of carrots and he'd just turn around and put his head in the corner. He was as close to an inanimate object as possible. But so I had him. I'm like, okay, he was used to be ridden in like double bridle and draw reins and 2 spurs, 2 whips and spurs. But he was sweet. It just was dull. And I started my process of, just making friends with, it was the first horse that I owned in a long time. So it was like a bunch of years after Tom. And so it was like my horse. And I started doing, spending more time with him and being, air quotes again, unprofessional with him. I started doing silly little girl horse stuff instead of being like this professional.
Like what?
Like riding him bareback, or just, hanging out with him in the barn. And he's the one that I started doing natural horsemanship with. Not because he was a problem, but because he was bored and I needed like silly horse tricks, literally. And I saw like a poster with some horse standing on a pedestal, and like, that looks silly. Why don't I go take a clinic and figure out how you do that? Cool. And through that process and kind of starting to understand mentally, emotionally where he was, and seeing that his dullness was not dullness, it was actually tension. And I was like, I didn't ever think of that. He seemed dull. He seemed lazy. He seemed low energy. And then when I saw it as tension, then I was like, whoa, how did I not know that? How could I not see that? And so then it's like this whole thing opened up, and I remember the day that there were these barns, there were like 20 stalls down the aisle, and it closed on both ends, and I would work all day. And so then I'd put him at the end of the day. And so it'd be like 9 o'clock at night. I'd be the only one left in the barn. I'd close both barn aisles. And I remember I was untacking him once, and he's just a good boy. And the blanket bars, and people would put their splint boots and stuff on it. And he was sitting there with the blanket bar, and I saw him like dare to like reach out, and he touched the splint boot, and then he like flinched. And I thought, why was he flinching? Did he think I was going to like correct him or something? Because he like dared to, like, he touched the boot and it wiggled, and he went like that. And I just looked in his eye, and I looked at him, and I took my hand and I knocked the splint boot off. And like in that moment, like we were like, he's like, oh really? I'm like, yeah. And so it became a ritual. At the end of the night, I'd let him loose horse, right? I'd let him loose, and he'd go up and down the aisle, and he would knock everything off. He'd grab the saddle pads, and the whole aisle would look like a tornado hit it. And he was so happy. It was like the glimmer in his eye came back. And then at the end, I'd put everything back nicer than they left it. And it was our little secret. But it was like this, seeing him for who he was and appreciating the like curiosity that had been knocked out of him. Don't touch that. That's expensive. And I'm like, throw it. And just in that moment, I'm just like, these little moments that are right there all the time, and we don't see it. Like, I didn't see his frozenness as active tension holding him from expressing his energy. I didn't see that flinch as fear from his own curiosity. It's like I didn't see that. That was all happening the whole time, I'm sure. But like that little shift, and then once you see that, you can't unsee it. So that started some changes in him, that he, at that age, he had serious feet issues from years of not being shod correctly that we reversed to a degree. But he gave me more in the last 2-3 years that I rode him when he was barely sound than he ever did. I remember doing like, I don't know, I stopped counting at like 24 one-tempies bareback in a halter out in the field. He was light, he was proud, he was turned on. He even like bucked somebody off once, and I had somebody like taking care of him, and I didn't tell them to ride him, but they just went ahead and got on, and they're like, yeah, and he bucked and I fell off, and I was like, yes. I was kind of like, go Vivaldi, like getting some spark and sass. So I don't know how he started that story, but like that was the shift of going from just competition horses and trying to be the professional and being a little bit cold and distant. As a professional, you kind of have to be a little bit cold and distant when you have other people's horses in training, because they're not your horses. I mean, I'll say you have to. Maybe that's just as a protective mechanism for my own horses, but that's part of the reason why I stopped training other people's horses, because I couldn't not train them with a deep connection. And I've had too many times where I've done that, and then you get the call, I'm picking him up on Tuesday. And I feel like I violated that horse because I just opened him. I just got him trusting. I just got everything light, and now he's going back to who knows what and who knows who that didn't even bother to learn about it. So
I'm sorry, everybody. I'm like selfishly just soaking this in, because there are those of us who are like, that are listening to this, that are just like, that story has so many layers to it. So many.
And I'm so happy that when he did retire, I was still in New York, and I didn't have a place to keep a horse. I wasn't going to keep him at a training facility. That's not a very happy place for a horse. So I sent him to a friend. But when I came to Florida, and then I bought my own place, he came back.
Stop it.
And lived out the rest of his life on my property. We called him the mayor of my property, and he's buried on my property. So that, yeah, I didn't have to wonder what happened to him.
Has anyone ever told you that like your life is like it's like there's like Disney moments?
That's actually a joke around our place, because
like I'm picturing you like Snow White with like the birds like flying around.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, that's a joke. You met Becky, my assistant, and she's very much connected in the world. But like, we have the Crows family comes in my barn every morning, and every time we ride, if there's butterflies, I mean, we do joke that we're in a Disney movie. It's sort of a nice way to live.
Okay, so there's people who are listening or watching this episode that are thinking maybe they're at a training facility, maybe they're at a very strict, disciplined environment where their horse or them, they feel like they can't do some of these things. What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think we have to do what we can, and And I think this is so many times we model how to be with a horse after the professional sport-specific trainers. And training facilities, to me, are training facilities. They're not really the greatest place for a horse to spend their whole life unless you can take a little bigger picture and get creative, right? So we think about horses' basic needs, friends, forage, freedom. We think, emphasize that point. Does that pick up on the podcast? We just have a lightning strike.
Sorry, guys. So
that's how important that is. Friends, forager, free.
Yeah. The Mother Nature, the universe, whatever, just was like exclamation mark Karen's statement like I've never heard before.
Anyway, so we want the horse's basic needs. That's like what horses need. Then you have to look at your own horse and what do they like and what do they not like. And horses are different. So like Vivaldi, the aka Bubba, the horse I just talked to you about, I know. When I first retired him, I thought, oh, we're just going to put him out in this big field at this one place. And he did not thrive. He was like, where's all the attention and people? So I had to move him to somewhere where he got more people attention. So you have to know what horses need and then know what your particular horse needs. And then if they can't be, say, out in a herd, what social time can you give with them? Can you at least let them allo groom with a buddy's horse? Find the one that they get along with, or, where can you give them some novelty and some variety and change, whether it's through silly horse tricks, just give them some tricks to do, or throw some interesting things in their pasture every now and then, or just make sure they get to go off their property, or notice what they like. So I once made a list of 69 things that my horses like. Yeah. I mean, among all my horses, 69 things that my horses like. So I tempt everybody to make a list, see if you can get to 5. Pick 5 things your horse likes, like things they will move towards and ask for. It doesn't have to be every single day. It's like scratches. Well, sometimes my horses are itchier than others, but I'll still put that on my list. And then if you can do 5, so you can get 10. If you can get 10, so you can get 20.
And I love that because even and Sharon Madeir, who's a good friend of yours, she said in her podcast, some horses actually revere scratches more than treats, right?
Yeah.
Like actually also observing your horse's preferences, right?
I have
love languages.
I have 2 buttons in my barn that I can put up. One, when they hit it, it's like with those buttons you can record a message. So one, when they hit it, it says cookies, and one says scratches. And so one of the things I'll do if I'm working with a horse, I'm like, well, which do they want today? And they'll literally tell you.
Oh, wow.
They'll go scratches, 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 cookie, scratches. Sometimes
cool.
Sometimes they get clever and they hit the scratches one, and then while I'm scratching them, they hit the cookie one.
Oh my gosh.
So then those have to back up a step and get there. But it's sometimes you can do that and you're like, all right, they're really into scratches today. And it's a fun game to play anyway. They get really into it. But it can be, it can tell you how to reward them that day. But it gets creative. But think of your life if you were in a box. It's still in the box, still in the box, still in the box. And think of ways that you can let your horses make choices. This to me is huge.
Ooh.
Find ways that your horses can show you their choices and they can make choices. So a lot of times we were talking today about my place is very horse safe in that if they were loose at any moment in any area, they'll be safe.
Yeah.
There's no place I have to hold on to them because if they get loose, they're going to stick their foot in the manure spreader or something.
Yeah.
So because of that, I can give them lots of opportunity to make choices. I don't know if you noticed the buckets in my aisle that we have 3 different flavored waters.
Yes, I did see that.
So sometimes in the grooming stall, they want to face the other way. If I always put them on cross ties, they never get to face the other way. Horses that are nervous in the cross ties, just undo the cross ties, see where they want to go. Sometimes they just want to turn around and sniff the back wall.
Cool.
Right. And sometimes they want to be groomed standing over there for some reason. Doesn't bother me. Why not? Sure.
Yeah.
I can stand over there.
Yeah.
My horse Cora that you met, my horses live out 24/7, but in the morning she like comes up, she's like, "Can I go in the special place? Can I go in the special place?" And we're like, "Sure." And she goes in, she's like, "I need in the stall." And then she sits in the stall with the fan on. And she thinks that's like her most special place. So she gets to be in the stall for a little while. And then so to have a little bit of flexibility, we humans are so into routine and efficiency that we like carve a groove in our life and like that's what we do. And yeah, that's efficient, but it gets a little bit boring sometimes for the horses. So I think just seeing how many ways could you do things differently just for the sake of being interesting, and how many ways can you give your horse a choice? And think of the quality of their life if they're able to do that.
When I was thinking of how many choices a horse must make in the wild,
Mm-hmm.
and how many choices all the, like, before we started breeding them and like sort of biologically engineering them, for lack of a better reference, how that species has evolved by making good choices, or in some cases bad choices. But the ones that are here now, the blueprint of Equus that we see now, is a species that has made 1,000 decisions in a day, right, in order to survive. And it's so interesting because, yeah, I do. When you think of a lot of the environment of the horses that we've known or grown up with, or the previous environments that we've asked horses to be in, or maybe not asked, told, right? We like strip them of their choice. And then it makes me realize, as you were talking, I was sitting there going, everyone reveres the horses that have a lot of personality, right? And as you're speaking, you can very clearly articulate how it is that you invite the personality that is present in every single horse around the world. There is a personality, there is preference, there is all that charm and interest and intrigue and uniqueness that exists. We just have to invite it to be present.
Absolutely. And they're so different. And I think so many horses have problems because they're in a program, and then, you have a program, it works for a bunch of horses, and there's one problem horse. It's not the horse, it's the problem. The system isn't fitting that horse. Horse didn't ask for it. He didn't ask for that job. So I don't know. I treat each of my horse. There's common threads for sure going through everything, but I'm different with my different horses, and there's some different rules for the different horses based on who they are, and that to me is my biggest fascination now at this point in my life with horses. Is it's the relationship. Who are they, independent of their horseness, right? And who am I, independent of my humanness? It's like, let's just like connect, and then, but there's rules, I love you, and there's rules. They have their rules, I have my rules, and that's how we get along. So it doesn't mean that my horses are walking all over me doing whatever they want all the time. In relationships, there's boundaries, and we have to make ourselves clear and say what we need. And there's some compromise sometimes, and sometimes there's not, and that's all part of it. But just really understanding who they are. And going back to the choice thing, it's really interesting for me. The horses I have now, most of them I've started and had for a long time, but there's some that have come to me. And so one horse that came to me in the last, I guess it's been like 5 years now, his life was a stall to the arena, or a turnout in like a 40-foot by 40-foot square, unless he started trotting or something, and then we need to go back in the stall.
Yeah.
And so he had problems. So part of when I get a horse like that, the first thing is to just acclimate him to being a horse, be happy in the environment, and then gradually see if I can get him to be happier being social and having more space. But at first you can't. Like if they're used to being in the stall, they get scared sometimes. They go out for a little bit and they just need to come in. But that doesn't mean that they want to be in the stall. It means they're mentally ill and they need some chance to recover. So with that horse he was in the stall, and then the stall went out to a back paddock, and at one point that back paddock was split in half, so it could be like stall, half of the paddock, or I could open it up full paddock. And like we gradually, increased the space and the time. And then he started to get really good at it, and it was about time for him to go to the big pasture. But I remember standing there, I was talking to somebody, and I watched him, and he was standing in the stall, and then he walked out, and he stood like over on one side of the paddock, and then he walked over there, and then he walked over there. And it wasn't like freaking, it wasn't like agitated. He wasn't like prancing around. He didn't look like he was fence walking. He was just like, I pictured him like on a Sesame Street Muppet. He's like, and I can go here. And I can go here. And I can go back in here. And I can go in the stall. And I can go out of the stall. And then go back in the stall. And he was literally like, I was just watching him like he's practicing, realizing he can choose. Because think of it, his life, how many choices did he have? Like which direction he faced in the stall. That was it. That barn had a sign on it that said horses must be led with a chain over the nose every time. What choices did that horse have? And then think about what training is. You want horses to like figure stuff out.
Yeah.
And I don't know the neurobiology, but I'm sure if you are not practicing making new neural connections and learning and wiring together, your brain's just doesn't get a chance to practice cause and effect. If I go out there now, I'm going to get rained on. If I go over there, there's different kind of grass.
Yeah.
Like just learning, the normal learning in life. And so I think having horses in those situations where they have social interaction, they have choices, they can move, they can think, they can, decide things. It's just making a smarter, healthier horse. And that ought to make them easier to train. It makes sense to me. A happy horse who's got strong neural connections and can think for himself.
Can we just get like a giant highway sign? Just Eric quotes Karen Rohlf. Like, because yeah. Right?
I think so. Yeah. And I mean, there's always going to, and then you have the horse who like makes too many decisions, has too many preferences, and they can be difficult to train for other ways. But I think that's if I'm going to have a training problem, I'd rather have it because my horse is like too confident in himself.
Well, you're describing it's often actually. Do you ever think often when we're talking about this, it kind of reminds you of the evolution of early childhood development and like kids in classes, and you had the difficult one that was like,
yeah,
would
now
put
they're
their hand
now
up,
they're the famous artist or scientist, right?
right? And if you were too challenging or you're too inquisitive or you're too, well, why do we do that? And when you push too much, then now, I mean, we revere those children and they get put in a special class and they get advanced, but there's more social conversation about just neurodivergence in general, right? Whereas before everyone was like, no, you all have to say, I mean, they even had everyone, everyone sat in the same.
Yeah, creating factory workers.
Yeah.
And a lot of training barns are like that. That's like a factory training system. And I think, well, I'm familiar with dressage. I know there's other disciplines that's true too, but dressage is very much the horses are expected to give their bodies and just allow themselves to be channeled. And you don't always, well, there's people who don't want their horses to think. They're like, they just have to let go. And there's a part of that, but it's a different letting go when the horse is choosing to let go, like being a dance partner rather than I'm giving up or just pure submission. Because if you want, where's brilliance going to come from? Where's power going to come from? It's not just like, yay, I made my horse do stuff. Like that doesn't feel good to me. Like, yay, I made my horse do stuff. Good for me, Karen, but it's much more interesting when you feel the horse get it and participate and help you with it. So that's what interests me. And that's maybe I can't, compete on the schedule, but I don't really care. So it's not my priority.
Talk about that moment where the Venn diagram of dressage and do you still use the term natural horsemanship? Do you think that's
it's so funny. I every time I use the term dressage, It's like, what are people picturing when I say that word?
Yeah.
And the same thing with natural horsemanship. What are people picturing when I say that word? So I'll
Words
Yeah.
have so much. Certain words in the horse world have so
I know.
much.
And that's why I love my
to them.
website. I say I help people enjoy the process of learning to be in harmony with their horse.
Right.
Right. Because that's really what I do. So stronger partnerships, healthy movement. And that's,
What more do you want?
yeah. So it's like, just it's hard to describe, to use those terms and not know what people are picturing. But for me, it was like in the dressage world, I thought I knew a lot about the horse's physical part, the gymnastic development, suppling and alignment, and, a lot about the physical part of it. And of course, you'd need to know a little bit about the mental, emotional part because you're dealing with the horse with the mind. Then when I went over and started doing the natural horsemanship stuff, it was really focused on the mental, emotional part. And how to, communication and the, like seeing the relaxation or seeing the tension. And I thought,
And sometimes a little less in the the healthy biomechanics.
yeah,
have
exactly.
observed.
Right. So I'm like, okay, young people, there used to be these things called libraries. But I was like in the library and I was down this aisle, and on this aisle had all the information about physical and gymnastic. And then I go to this aisle and was all the mental emotion. I'm like, hey guys. And they weren't talking to each other.
Totally.
And they were actually making fun of each other.
And they still don't talk sometimes, and they still make fun of each other.
I know what it feels like to be in the middle of that. So, but I'm like, I felt like I had the best of both worlds. I'm like, how about mental, emotional, and physical? Because in the dressage world, I was seeing horses who weren't being seen mentally and emotionally. There was like things that could be done. If you have the horse understand what they need to do and they want to do it, they will organize their body in such a way to get it to happen. I had my horse Monty use the Lipizan. I remember the first time I had him close circling at Liberty at the canter, and I'm like, well, there's this canter pirouette canter. Why am I using all these aids? And he did it because that's what he needed to do to keep cantering and come in that's close.
Right.
And then, natural horsemanship, they're doing the mental emotional, but they're not seeing that some of the emotional stress was because they weren't balanced enough in their bodies to do what was being asked.
Yes.
And they couldn't see it. And then it was like treated as a respect issue or something. I'm like, so that's where I was just trying to see, like, what are these guys doing that works? What are these guys doing that works? There was stuff that these guys were doing that I was not interested in, and stuff that the other group was not interested in. I thought, I can let go of the stuff that I don't want, but I can take the stuff I do. And it was just like watching what works. You do this and it has this effect. That's cool. I might need that someday. And so I wrote the book because I had spent a year with Pat and Linda, and Pat kept me very busy with no time to do any dressage. Every time I'd be like, I'm going to go do dressage. He's like, let's go do cows. I'm like, I'm out with the cows again. Anyway, but it was good because it made me stop. And then when I got back, back home at my place, I thought, I'm supposed to be training horses and teaching people. And I don't know really like how I have all these exercises and and how do I decide on any particular day with any particular horse which one I'm doing? How do I know? So I sat myself down and wrote the book so I could explain it to myself. And I was like, I have to make this make sense, and I have to do it in a way that I can explain the concept so other people can make those decisions. And that's how it came about. So I learned it as I was writing it.
Well, and I've heard this on this road trip. If you want to learn something really well, teach it.
Yeah.
Which I was like, what? But it makes sense.
Well, and it was every time a horse and a person came in front of me, I was like, what do I see? What do I see? And so the first filter was, is this a foundational issue? Is this an understanding or fear emotion issue? Or is this, and then sometimes it wasn't. Sometimes the horse is like, I'm a happy camper. So I'm like, okay, then it might be a biomechanical issue. Like the happy camper is crooked and stiff in its back. Or if it's a happy camper and he's moving really beautifully in a line through his body, then we might focus on gymnastic issues. So anytime a person came to me, whether they were a natural horsemanship person, a Western, a jumper, or an upper level dressage person, I'd kind of step back and go, what am I seeing? Is there a lot of fighting with each other? That's foundational. Is there harmony, but there's crookedness? That's a biomechanical issue. Or is it just they're having trouble with their half pass, and I can really go in and like tweak the subtleties of the half pass and alignment and get that there. So those 3 filters are the main thing that I do now. And to know that a lot of times dressage issues are not dressage issues. And people get into trouble with their horses when they go to a dressage trainer with a problem that's not a dressage issue. And the trainer doesn't know how to deal with that kind of issue. And so now, like, to be able to stop and go, okay, I know we wanted to work on our counter canter today, but do you see your horse is scared over here? Which do you want to do? Do you want to work on your counter canter? We're going to have to go somewhere else where he's not scared. Or we can use this opportunity to get him more confident over here. But the worst thing you can do is mess up your dressage work fighting with your horse for a reason that's unrelated completely to the dressage. But I see that happening a lot.
Can you think of, and you don't have to, obviously don't name any names.
Yeah.
Think of an example of someone came to you.
Well, here's something I observed. So I was taking a clinic with a trainer that I really liked.
Join us next week for part 2, where we talk about what we do when something doesn't feel right in a lesson, why knowing when to pause is so powerful, and how trainers can foster confident, curious riders.